Thank you so much for having me today. Now, we've only got 20 minutes, so we're going to get through a lot in 20 minutes. My name is Pastor Tim Gillespie. I'm the lead pastor of Crosswalk Church in Redlands, California, and Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Portland, Oregon, and Northeast Atlanta, and Clinton, Massachusetts, and in the foothills region of Los Angeles. Yeah, we're doing something a little bit different here. But I want to talk to you a little bit about our expansion model and what we've been doing here over the last 3 or 4 years, including what we've done through COVID. But first, we start with our identified values. Now, there's a few values that are really important to us. And of course, the most overarching value is that we are a community of Jesus. That's what we talk about. That's what we preach about. That is our one issue. We often say we're a one-issue church. But there's a few other values that have helped us become who we are. See, one is that we will be a community of belonging. That's our first end statement. I'll talk about those in just a second. But it's important that this is the way that our community should behave towards one another, the way that we should, as we say, this is what our communities should be offering. The second thing is that we should be looking at momentum. This is the way that we're following the Holy Spirit and we're thinking about what God is doing in the world and how we're responding to it. And the third value that's really important for us is experience or aesthetic. We want to curate an experience that's deeply meaningful, that's excellent in every way, and deeply committed to the Adventist vision of the gospel. Now, this is important for you to know because one of the criticisms, I shouldn't say criticisms, one of the questions we get asked is, wait a second, what you're doing is so different. Are you truly an Adventist church? Just so you know, we absolutely 100% are. And that leads us to what our end statements are. So we've got 5 end statements. They predate my tenure here as lead or senior pastor. The first one I mentioned before, Crosswalk will be a community of belonging. This means that when you come, you are home. When you are here, you are family. And it's really important that everyone experience that, from the way that they park in the parking lot to the way that they are met in the lobby to the way that they are engaged with through the worship and the preaching. That's really important. Secondly, our next statement is that Crosswalk will be a community where people learn and grow in an authentic relationship with God. Now, authenticity is really important. So we do church the way we feel comfortable doing church. We talk about God in the way that we feel comfortable talking about God. It may not be what everybody else has seen. It may not sound or feel exactly the way traditionally we have done, but that's okay. Listen, we know we're not for everybody, but we also know that there's something that God is doing. Our third end statement is that Crosswalk will be relevant in living out the ways of Jesus in our place and time. That means we're going to be truth tellers. We're going to audit ourselves. We're going to find out what's really happening. When it comes to our outreach, we're going to make sure that we're filling gaps that are needed in the community. When it comes to the way that we care for one another, we're going to make sure that we are honest with each other. Also, number 4, Crosswalk will be a community that lives beyond herself by caring and advocating for the powerless, oppressed, and abandoned. You're going to see a lot of wonderful pictures of our worship service, but what we won't see in this particular presentation is all the work that we do through our free medical clinic, which is now moving into a free medical and dental clinic. We also have free legal advice. We serve close to 100 homeless folk and underserved people every single week. So that's the work that we are doing to make sure that we're advocating for the powerless, oppressed, and abandoned. And lastly, Crosswalk will be a community that exemplifies servant leadership. And we believe that servant leadership is the most excellent type of leadership. And that means the way we serve one another is the way that we care about one another. And the way that we give to the church, self-sacrificing, whether it be monetarily, whether it be our time, all that is really important. And we have a goal of making sure that our leadership team is responsible for those end statements, and our staff and our volunteers are responsible for the means to get to those end statements. That's how we sort of work together, and that's a bit of our governance structure as well. Now, when I got to Crosswalk, we had this wonderful vision statement in 2014. It said, learning to love well. Now, this was great and informative, and it was great for the first 10 years of our church. However, we began to clarify and truly simplify our mission. With that, we needed to find new and different language to represent the new thinking, the new focus, the new people, and the more clarified vision. We wanted some traditional innovation around our mission and vision, and we settled on simply the word love well. Now, we use it as a culturally relevant marker. You'll see hashtag LoveWell all over our stuff that we post online. But this allowed us to find our audience in a manner that was useful, both on social media platforms as well as in the community. It's easy to remember a vision and mission statement that simply says, love well. And as we were using these principles of design thinking, we began to experience and clarify. We began to make changes that would make an impact the user experience, that would further our messaging, that would create a sense of belonging to anyone who walks in the doors. The clarification process is painful, just so you know, in that the decisions are often hard and taken personally sometimes in the church as you begin to change things. But we began to see a congregation that self-delineates into the mission and vision of loving well. And I understand that in a market with many options, this is much easier to just find your church. However, that homogeneous church experience that we've had for so long in some areas is why this mission expansion model is so important and needs to be made clear. We're not capturing all of the people in our demographics with only one type of church. Diversity broadens the opportunity to reach people. We can do this by simply understanding what business we are in. So at the risk of using an example that you've probably heard ad nauseum, let me just give you one case study that we thought about as we began to change what we were doing. In the late 90s and early 2000s, there were some Blockbuster employees who were trying to redefine their industry. They went to their employer, and they had a great new ideas to send out DVDs by mail to their customers. However, it didn't fit the Blockbuster business model, which was a punishment model, which was bring your tapes in late, bring your DVDs in late, and we'll punish you for it in order to gain revenue and market space. In fact, it would destroy their model. So these young executives who went at least 4 times over a few years to their Blockbuster executives finally left. And the reason that the Netflix guys were able to pivot into a new business model, which they did again when streaming happened, was because they understood what business they were in. You see, Netflix redefined content delivery. And because they understood what business they were in, they were able to continue their core business while pivoting their business model. Perhaps there's room for some of that in our church world as well. When we understand what business we're in, the business of giving people the opportunity to connect with Jesus Christ and community, we become less fearful of the different models in order to continue the work that we've been given. Now, I understand that we're an acquired taste here at Crosswalk and that we're not for everyone. However, to admit this means that we have to admit that our traditional expressions of the Adventist message might not be meeting the needs of everyone who is looking for Jesus. With this in mind, we have the opportunity to greatly expand our work in our communities by simply allowing for diversity. One should not hurt the other. In fact, a rising tide raises all ships. It's not a question of, do we need another church in the community? Unless every single church is full and there's nobody on the streets, we do need more churches. So we have to define why you're there. And one of the things we began to realize, and we continue to realize, is that we have often worked in a scarcity model, but God has an abundance model for us. Because if we believe in a scarcity model, then we don't believe that there's enough people. We don't believe there's enough stuff. We don't believe there's enough innovation for us to get done what needs to get done. If we believe that there are only a certain amount of people that will come into our churches, those with a previous understanding of what a Seventh-day Adventist is, or those who were with us and then left, we will constantly be fearful of another expression of church in our areas due to the lack of people that might attend our own services. However, if we believe in the abundance of God, we also believe then that there are those different expressions that the gospel can reach different people. Then we begin to understand that, of course, there are not enough churches. If churches are just for us, then maybe. But we believe in the abundance of God, that God will bring the people when we build the churches that he's asking us to build. You see, what began to happen is Crosswalk began to grow as we clarified our mission and clarified our vision. As Lovewell became, the bumper sticker people were putting on cars and the t-shirts that they were wearing, even to other churches at times, we began to recognize that, hey, God is doing something here. The Holy Spirit is moving. We're gaining some momentum. And we also began to recognize that unintentional growth can be cancer. And what we needed to understand is how we could grow healthfully. We also wanted to stay away from the common practice of getting big and then spending all our times creating bigger boxes for the people that we have. Well, there's a time and a place for that, of course. We wanted to see if there was something else that we might have been called toward. And out of this came our 3 different expressions of love well. Right? The reason why we decided to move towards a multi-site ministry with video venues as well as with campus pastors is because, and here's just some quick statistics, 500 million people in the United States worship at multi-site churches on an average weekend. There are 8,000 in North America. There are 8,000 multi-site church campuses. 88 out of the 100 fastest growing churches are employing multi-sites approach. 47% of multi-site churches have a campus in rural or small town areas, so this is not just a big regional kind of thing. Lay participation has increased by 88% in multi-site churches. 68% of multi-site churches have leadership development programs. 85% of multi-site churches have grown since adding an additional campus. If multi-site churches were a denomination, again, these statistics are North America, they would be the 4th largest denomination, and that one is in the world. That's pretty fascinating. So why wouldn't we offer this approach? Well, the Seventh-day Adventist structure hasn't necessarily allowed us to do it. But we began to think maybe there's an opportunity as we were hitting some of our caps in our attendance. We began to think maybe there's an opportunity for us to think about things differently. So we came up with 3 different kind of models and expressions, and we still use these today. The first one are Love Well groups, we call them. And this is a small group or a network of small groups, right? So we consult with them, we give them resources, and we provide them the teaching that Crosswalk has. And this Love Well group is a great expression that anybody can have. If you find yourself in a place where there's no church or a church that just really doesn't resonate with you, you can basically start a home church. And what we've put together are these really cool boxes that you'll see behind me that are basically church in a box. It comes with all this material to get you started as a host to begin to do a Love Well group. Now, it can always stay a small group, or it might eventually begin to grow into what we call a Love Well community. Now, whether you're an affiliated community or you become a Love Well community itself. So let me give you 2 examples. Our Northeast Atlanta campus, they started as a Love Well community. They started as a small group of people. They were bigger than a small group. They met and began to do church. But they did not have a Crosswalk campus delineation yet because there were some markers and benchmarks that they needed to hit. The second way is that we had this church in Clinton, Massachusetts. Back in 2020, I believe, is when they began to really use us. And they were just using some of our teaching, but they had their own branding, they had their own identity. It was great. Since then, they have become a Crosswalk campus as we've begun to see them grow and move more into the culture that we help to curate with them. But so you've got these Love Well groups, small groups. You've got these Love Well communities, which are sort of growing. And we now have one in Woodland, Texas, which is, they probably have 30 people that meet with them. They're beginning their kids programs, and they're doing this all out of a home at this point. We hope to eventually transition them to a Crosswalk campus, but we'll get there. And then lastly, what we have is a Crosswalk campus. Now, some of our campuses start out that way. Crosswalk Portland started out that way. Crosswalk Chattanooga started out that way. We were planting one in Denver, Colorado during COVID, and unfortunately it all sort of fell apart. So just so you know, this expansion model doesn't always work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but we're going where God wants us to go. Now, here's what's interesting, and those of you who are within the Seventh-day Adventist Church and you understand the structure will get this. One of the things is that we plant local churches. We don't plant churches that are Redlands. They don't belong to us. Crosswalk Chattanooga is part of the Georgia Cumberland Conference. Crosswalk Portland is part of the Oregon Conference. Crosswalk Foothills is part of the Southern California Conference. They pay tithe up to their own entities. They don't pay tithe to us. We have an affiliation that is an affiliation of assent. They agree to become part of what we're doing to help us grow the culture and grow the kingdom through the Crosswalk brand, if you will. And I know using the term brand sometimes can be a little distracting when it comes to church work, but it works because people understand who we are and what we do. So let me give you a quick little case study right here. So when we launched Crosswalk Chattanooga, which was our first Crosswalk real campus launch, we had to ask the question, how does a church in California plant a church in Tennessee? But listen, in a world where Airbnb is the largest hotel chain without owning a room, where Uber is the biggest taxi service without owning a taxi, and Netflix is the biggest content creator and deliverer without owning a theater, we recognized that things could be done differently. It was in 2017 that we had our first idea that maybe we could start a campus somewhere else. We began by December to take in giving from a group of people in Chattanooga. Now, when I say that, we took their giving here at Redlands because they did not have a mechanism to do that. We held on to that money for their mission. And when they got organized enough, they were able to pull on that money and help grow the church. So by the time they started, it was great. We started pop-ups in June of 2019. It took us that long. We started with about 100, 150. And I got to tell you, they've moved prior to COVID, they had about 400 to 500 people meeting each week in 2 services. Now, it's hard to say post-COVID, right? But now they are back up to those numbers, meeting each week. They've got 40 or 50 kids. They're starting one of our college groups, which is called Future Of. They're beginning that. In fact, this weekend, I don't know when you're watching this, so it's actually last weekend. I was kicking this off, which is really, really exciting for it to happen. We put out flyers, we got people excited, and by November 3, we began to meet every single week. Now, that was really important because we knew that there was an audience that we were trying to reach. And so we've done a lot of work on the brand to begin to understand what kind of person we're trying to reach. And so let me just read you a few things that we worked on through our branding. Now, let me just take a look at this. Who are we talking to? What are their motivations? Crosswalk is speaking to the restless Christian, or SDA, who has become dissatisfied or hurt by church as usual. They're still seekers and range from curious about Christ to devoted followers who simply haven't found him active or relevant in another church family, or they're out of church family. They tend to want to be challenged, even confronted, with a new version of scriptural interpretation. And they feel compelled by a church that gives them a platform to act on their desire for inclusion, social justice, and community outreach. What we do on Saturday morning propels us into the community to do the work that we're doing with them. So the question is, what does the audience think and feel now? Much of our audience, we say, is in the final stand with their denomination and with their churches and are willing to give it another shot. If the local church can steer clear of institutional and hypercultural Adventism, if they smell wafts of inauthenticity, denominational elitism, or any of what they came from, they may leave. They're hungry for authentic humility, real talk, a non-embarrassing brand experience, and a broader, deeper view of Jesus. What we mean by brand experience is that I will stand up on the platform of every single one of our campuses and say this: we make a brand promise to you, and that brand promise is that you will not be embarrassed to bring someone to church. You will get an incredible lobby experience, whether it's coffee or something else. You'll get even a great parking experience. I was up in Portland this last weekend for their launch, and the parking team actually put handwritten notes on every single person's car. It was amazing. And so there's a lot of stuff going on, but we just wanted you to know who is the audience that we're going for. One last thing when it comes to our persona and our brand. We wanted to talk about who we are. Crosswalk sees itself as the cultural liaison. And I'm going to read this to you, and I hope it's okay, because I really love the language here. We've always been questioners, dreamers, hole pokers, and often misfits. But eventually we found our gift, a love of beauty, aesthetic, truth, creativity, and really, truly experiencing our lives. Our work gives us great personal joy, and we're really good at it. But then personal joy isn't our real motivator. Deep down, we're sharers. We'd rather teach someone to paint than sell a painting. We're at our best when we bring people in, those who might not have access or understanding, and push them to go, do, see, love well for themselves. And then we challenge them to bring someone else along too. We're not great rule followers or what you might think of as proper. We tend to say things out loud that others won't, but we believe our gifts bring people from all backgrounds to that table, teaching them to appreciate great food and art and a wider perspective and a real, honest conversation. We're artists, translators, mavericks, seekers, and awakeners, but most of all, we're door openers, inviting anyone who walks by inside. Those words are really important to me because I really believe that that's what the Crosswalk mission expansion model is about, finding people who resonate with this, getting them involved, and then finding people who are on their final stand in church to bring them home and bring them back. There's just some different cultural liaisons that we have examples of who have done this same sort of thing. And yeah, those are examples that are out of the church world. One of the other things that we do is we make sure that the deliverables that we give to our campuses and to our communities are of the highest quality. So whether it's a series package with pretty amazing graphics, with pretty phenomenal social media tools, whether it's people making sure that they lean into the particular series that we're doing. We make sure that we write series guides for the majority of our series. And everything, like I said, has been designed to the nth degree to make sure that the experience that people have, these were actually books that we wrote that people went to every single day and had opportunities to write in and share. It looked like this. We broke the weeks open just like our series, and then they had opportunities every day to read and to write stuff that God was moving in their hearts through this whole process. I know I'm going through a lot, but this is what's important for you to understand. This is where we are right now. Our Redlands campus is our founding campus. Then we've got Chattanooga that meets every single week, 2 services. Then we've got Portland that just launched weekly, which is incredible. Our Northeast Atlanta crew is still coming back from COVID, but they're doing an amazing job out there. We've got our Foothills campus, which we hope to launch in 2022 weekly. They've been meeting monthly for a long time. We were about ready to launch and COVID hit and shut everything down, as everyone knows. And we've got our Clinton campus, which was a transitional campus from Remix Church in Clinton, Massachusetts, to Crosswalk Clinton. Now, I know that seems sort of random. Like, how are you choosing spots? I'll tell you how. Wherever people want us to come, that's when we come. We have to be invited. We don't have our sights on a city and then we go and we force Crosswalk somewhere. We want to make sure that we're invited. And I got to tell you, I get calls 2 or 3 times every single month, if not every week, about, have you ever thought about coming to this place? How do we start a small group? There's groups that are meeting and watching and connecting with us that we didn't even know about. People who have 20 and 30 people in their homes. Now, I'm not saying we're doing everything right. If I had another 20 minutes, I could talk to you about all the mistakes that we've made along the way. But I believe this, multi-sites work, and they work within Adventism as well. One of the things that we're able to offer is really solid preaching, great curation of the culture that you're trying to build, a mission and vision statement that is not only easy to remember, but it builds momentum in every single person's life. Even things as, like I mentioned before, t-shirts and bumper stickers that you can give to people when they come into church, immediately they begin to identify with the brand. And understand, everything that we do builds this brand to build the kingdom of God. We do not make money off this. We are not another denomination that is being set up. We are working within the boundaries of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, and our administrators have been amazing. If somewhat slow at times, they get the vision, and when they get the vision, they go all in. Now, I believe God's going to do a lot more with Crosswalk, but I also believe God can do a lot more with what vision he's given you. This is one opportunity. And I'll tell you this, we haven't scratched the surface of how we can open up this conversation about multi-site churches. But if you ever have a question, feel free to email me at tim@crosswalkvillage.com. We'd love to connect with you. We'd love to help you plant a church if we can, or we just love to give any advice that we can give you. Or if you just want to talk about how we failed, we're happy to talk about that too. But I got to tell you, it's been exciting that God is moving. We planted churches during COVID. To see Crosswalk Portland start with 292 people the very first day that they met all together weekly was incredible. To see 500 people meet in Chattanooga every single week and them reaching out to the college students in their area is also incredible. To watch Redlands campus remain vital and create momentum because our people are excited about the fact that we're planting churches for their brothers and their sisters and their aunts and uncles and family in different areas and where they came from. And to have people go from one of our churches to another one of our churches and feel the same experience has been really exciting. It hasn't been an easy journey, and through COVID, what we saw is a great expansion of our online campus, and that every single week grows and, it shrinks and it expands and shrinks as it goes, but we're seeing more and more influence that God is being able to give us through the work that we do. And we can talk about that whole experience as well. Listen, I just want to say this. Whatever God is calling you to, if it's innovative ministry, if it's something that's a little sideways that hasn't been done before, I actually believe there's space and room for it in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. You might not think so, but there is. Everything that God has given us to do, we've stepped into faithfully, not always asking permission, sometimes having to ask for forgiveness. But as we've stepped in faithfully, we've seen that God has blessed, God has grown, and we are grateful for it. So may God continually bless you, grow your influence in ministry, and give you a clear vision on the next steps of how you grow the kingdom of God. Thank you, and as we always say here at Crosswalk, love well.